Alright, good afternoon, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion House, New Mexico, working on oil painting oak tree in a flower vase. Alright, today I'm just going to increase the opacity of the leaves, the last layer of leaves, which are still pretty translucent, and more of the branches are showing through than I would like for the final layer anyway. So I'll probably hit it with some more limbs as well, but for now I've mixed up a tree green, cadmium green, and some light cadmium green to make a slightly darker layer, and it also has a little bit of liquid in it just to thin it out a touch.
Not one of your measurements confirms your final conclusion, but people say, well, but induction and accumulation of sample and averaging. Averaging is what's going on here at the center. And the key to using averaging with intellectual effectiveness is you're making an assumption that's very deep. And the assumption you're making is that time is invariant. Well, that is simply an assumption. It is the centrally untested assumption of science over the past 500 years. Now, let's take something really important.
You say that this is the amount of electricity that's flowing through this particular point.
Well, but the whole notion of science is not that we attain states of intellectual consensus, but that we have a true reflection of the phenomenon. So then here's a case where this becomes more important: the speed of light. The speed of light in the general and special theory of relativity is specified to be a constant. So, since 1908, the speed of light has been measured on this one planet with various devices. Not once has any device ever gotten a value exactly congruent with any other device. Never. Well, so then they rush forward, very flustered that you would even mention this embarrassment. And they say, well, you don't understand. It's the limit of the instrumentality. Well, but wait a minute. This is just a phrase some weasel lawyer scientist put together to explain why they weren't getting the right value. Because they're saying, okay, we're measuring the speed of light. Now, we're within 30 meters per second of where it was yesterday, or this measurement is only off by 20 meters per second, 1 part in billions. But the point is, you're not getting the same measurement that you got yesterday. And so why are you saying that the speed of light is constant? Well, because the entire theory of relativity falls to pieces if you ever yield on that principle. And so then a person who was trying to do what in science is called save the phenomenon would say, well, let's plot the speed of light and see how much it's varying. Well, now, if it is in fact what is called the limit of the instrumentality that is causing this problem, then do we all agree that the values should cluster around a mean? In other words, this guy is 30 meters too fast. This guy in Australia, he gets 30 meters too slow. This person's 70 meters too fast. Right? The values would cluster. Right. But what do we actually see when we examine these variations in the speed of light? We see that from 1908 until 1975, and I'll explain why 1975, from 1908 to 1975, the speed of light has apparently slightly increased. The values are not staying constant. They're drifting slightly upward. Well, we are on one tiny planet in one very narrow slice of time, and yet we, having measured the speed of light to be sliding slowly toward faster and faster, have created a physics based on the assumption that it's a universal constant and never changes. Weird. Completely in contravention to the stated methods of science. Well, then what happens in 1972? they hold a conference in Geneva, and everybody lays their cards out on the table, and they say, look, this is just a pain, this whole business about the speed of light. From now on, the International Geophysical Union will define the speed of light. And nobody should go and measure it. Don't do that. If you want to know the speed of light, flip open your handbook of physical constants, and we, the International Physical Union, have decreed that this is the speed of light. Weird. And, we could go on with similar examples of melting points. When a compound is created or isolated from nature that has never been created before, one of the first things you do with it is you, as a physical chemist, you determine its melting point. This then goes into a handbook that's published around the world of melting points. Well, the apparatus for doing melting point measurements hasn't changed greatly in 100 years. Melting points for certain compounds have fluctuated 3 degrees centigrade. We're not talking thousandths of a degree here. We're talking about all over the map kind of stuff. Rupert studied this, got a complete set of the 20th century's published melting points. And, what is chromium dioxide? What did it melt at in 1934? What did it melt at in 1958? And looked at this, made charts showing many melting points rising with the measurements over time, took it to the editors of the the publishing house that is in charge of it. They were amazed. They hadn't a clue. It's a complete bafflement, unless you believe, that these things are wavering, and that everything is less, not subject to eternal laws. Yeah.
It's interesting that you said that the speed of light is accelerating, that these are all going up, and everything seems to be increasing as does novelty in returns. That's the good choice this time.
Yeah, it's slight, but very suggestive. And when you think about it, if you really believe in eternal laws of nature, then you just have a philosophical mess on your hands. Eternal laws of nature. The universe. Yeah, the universe is a finite thing. It burst into existence X billion years ago. Where are you going to say the laws of nature were before the universe existed? And don't forget, we're not only talking about laws of physics. That's one thing. What about the laws of gene segregation? Where were they before biology existed? What kind of a question is that to even ask? Clearly we're in a sort of a loop here of ignorance. It's ignorance that generates questions that have no meaning. And so the universe is a thing where habit constrains, but novelty overcomes that constraint. And once overcome, new levels of novelty become incorporated into the old set of constraints. Like, for instance, take Manhattan. Manhattan is an incredibly novel addition to the geography of southern New York. And yet, once in place, it has its rules. You don't break them. If you break the rules, you'll be run over by a city bus or mugged or something. So novelty establishes new domains of constraint, and then out of that constraint, new novelty emerges. And this is a principle which I believe, thanks to Prigozhin and others, reaches all the way across the domain of phenomena. We're not just simply talking about what goes on in biology. We're talking about what goes on in astrophysics, biology, cultural anthropology, sociology. These principles are universal. And this is something new. This is something new in the 20th century. And it's been a hard battle. I mean, the theory of evolution is essentially a theory which is an effort to account for the large numbers of diverse plants and animals on the planet. Darwin in his diaries referred to what he was doing as searching for a solution to the species problem.
That didn't take too terribly long, so I'm going to take a medium yellow and a cadmium green and do a slightly lighter yellow green now to accent the lighter areas of where the light would be hitting, touching the leaves.
Organism rather than a machine, which is what we inherit out of Descartes and Newton. If we can see that the universe is an organism, then we can see that it is evolving across all spectrums of phenomena. I mean, stars evolve, societies evolve, personalities, communities, tectonic systems. Everything seeks higher states of order. This is the Prigogine principle, that systems actually seek higher states of order. This is, he and Manfred Eigen and that crowd coined the phrase dissipative structure. Dissipative structures are these special situations which arise in nature where order is actually preserved far from equilibrium. That's the technical way of saying it. In other words, equilibrium is where you get to when you let go and then you drift toward death, disintegration, decay, equilibrium. And sooner or later, in the old paradigm, all systems will reach equilibrium. A cup of coffee left standing becomes a cold cup of coffee. Everything seeks equilibrium. But what Prigogine showed was that some systems don't, and that they are incredibly tenacious. Life being the most obvious example. How does it do it? How does life perform this trick of maintaining itself homeostatically far from equilibrium? Well, it does it through the process of transferring order in the environment into its energy cycle, and then passing disorder out of the system. This is what we call eating and excreting. You take in very highly ordered proteins with a lot of energy bound into carbohydrate and protein. You extract energy from that and excrete out a much less differentiated, much less energy-intensive material. And by cycling energy through the form, the morphogenetic form of the body maintains itself. It's a kind of miracle. I mean, the form is like a ghost in matter. The matter flows through it, and the form puts the matter through a series of contortions that allow the form to exist. And as long as the form, the organismic form, can attain high-grade stuff, which it can get energy out of, it will maintain itself far from equilibrium. And through the miracle of genetics and heredity, this maintenance of a state far from equilibrium has been going on this planet for several billion years. And of course, mind emerges out of this. Mind is a phenomenon of metabolic activity, where, so far as we know, where there is not metabolism, there is not consciousness. Even computers, they have to have a flow of electrons in their guts. When there's no electrons flowing, there's no computation taking place. Similarly for us, when there is no flow of electrons, no charge transfer, then you're dead. And there's no coming back from that. But if you have had children, look what's happened. Half of your information has been kept alive in the non-equilibrium thermodynamic state of the dissipative structure, which is the species, you see.
I experienced all states where my mind seemed very disconnected with my body. It almost seemed as if it was an entity unto itself.
Well, some of our best people are working on this. I don't know how far they'll get. It's a great question, isn't it?
I mean, even separate from the brain. I mean, neurology of the brain is not the mind. I mean, that's some argument.
Well, we talked about this the other day. You know, is the brain the repository of consciousness, or is it like a TV antenna? Seeking consciousness in the brain may be like seeking little men in the radio. And the problem of memory. Where was it? We had that whole discussion about memory, and then in the New York Times there was a whole article about molecular theories of memory and what a big bust it was and how they haven't really gotten anywhere. Oh, I know what it was about. It was about the silent areas of the genome. Remember how we talked about how only 5% of the DNA transcripts protein and the other 95% is what's called trash DNA, except that it appears to be very necessary and no one knows why. And then how this was a possible storage site for memory. But I don't know. I mean, it may require technologies we can't even imagine to correctly model memory. They're now talking about what are called terabyte storage modules, which would be crystals basically read by the intersection of very, very fine laser beams that when they could intersect at any of a very large number of points in this terabyte cube, and each of these possible points is a 0 or a 1. And so you have a very, very dense storage potential. But, you know, we have a way to go. There are 9 billion genes approximately in most higher mammals, and you can get that easily on the head of a pin. Easily on the head of a pin. So nature as model for nanotechnological storage of information, we still have a way to go. Well, we can talk about this or not talk about it. Anybody have anything they want to take off from on this? It's a big subject. It's nebulous. The paradigm changes everything, you see. And the paradigms now come out of science. How we view nature determines how we view ourselves, how we plan our societies, and how we relate to the past.
You said about freedom, or things like habit, just kind of falling into this rut and just continuing to channel along through it. This is the process that we've been basically going through, and as new ideas are spawned, new things, little pieces of novelty erupt along the path, and finding ways to jump out of our tracks and join in with other tracks and perhaps create new habit patterns for others to form on. And
Alright, now it's looking a little more solid.
Fascinated by the feeling of it, the energy I got from
More variations in the tone of green as well, gives it a little bit of motion.
It's really just a matter of continually bringing out new ideas that's going to change us or transition us, rather what like children talk about.
And a nice texture beginning to build up, in contrast with the very smooth silver. So that's it for the moment. Next step will probably be the horizon line and then starting the clouds. But it's going to be another time. I might work on Anne Frank today, or awe, but I wanted to get this tree looking better for the moment. Thank you for watching. That's Adam Sturch, broadcasting from Mushroom Mansion House, New Mexico, working on oil painting, oak tree, and a flower vase. Have a good day, Earth.
Every woman should consider having only one child.